There's a financial decision most people make in their 20s or 30s that ends up shaping the entire trajectory of their wealth. Almost nobody recognizes it at the time. Almost nobody factors it into their long-term plans. Almost nobody runs the actual math on it before they sign the paperwork. And yet this single decision, repeated 3 or 4 times across a working life, determines whether someone retires comfortable or retires broke, whether they have hundreds of thousands of dollars in their investment accounts at 60 or essentially nothing, whether they spend their working years building wealth or quietly bleeding it away every single month. The decision is what kind of car you drive. I know that sounds dramatic. Cars feel like a personal preference, a lifestyle choice, something you pick based on what you like, what you can afford, what fits your situation. We don't usually think of car decisions as financial decisions. We think of them as identity decisions. That's exactly the trap. Because the math of car ownership is not a small thing. The average new car payment in the United States right now is $767 per month. The average new car loan stretches for 69 months. Some loans now run 84 months. That's 7 full years of paying for a single vehicle. Over a working life, the difference between someone who buys reliable used cars and drives them for years and someone who continuously cycles through new vehicles isn't small. It's the difference between someone who retires with hundreds of thousands of dollars in their investment accounts and someone who retires with almost nothing. Tonight, I'm going to walk you through the math nobody runs, the trap most people don't see, and the quiet pattern that the actually wealthy follow almost without exception. By the end, you'll understand why driving an old car is one of the smartest financial moves you'll ever make, and why almost everyone around you is doing the exact opposite. Let me walk you through what's actually happening to people who finance new cars in 2026, because the numbers are worse than almost anyone admits. The average new car loan in the United States is $42,500. The average monthly payment is $767. The average loan term is 69 months. Many people now take loans for 72, 84, or even 96 months. That $767 payment is just the loan itself. It doesn't include insurance, which on a new car often runs another $200 to $300 per month. It doesn't include gas. It doesn't include maintenance. It doesn't include the inevitable repairs after the warranty expires. It doesn't include parking, registration, or any of the other costs that come with owning a vehicle. The all-in cost of operating a typical new car in 2026 is somewhere between $900 and $1,200 per month when you add everything up honestly. Now think about that across a year. That's $11,000 to $14,000 annually. Across the 69-month term of an average loan, that's somewhere between $63,000 and $83,000 gone for a single vehicle. And the vehicle itself is losing value the entire time. New cars lose up to 60% of their original value through depreciation. The car you bought for $42,000 is worth $17,000 by the time the loan is paid off. You spent $80,000 to end up owning an asset worth $17,000. This is the math nobody runs at the dealership. The salesman doesn't show you a spreadsheet. The financing department doesn't add up the total cost across the entire term. They show you the monthly payment, frame it as affordable, and let you sign. Most people never run the math themselves. They just notice that the payment fits in their budget, and they sign. And then they do it again, 5 years later, and again, 5 years after that, and again, every 5 to 7 years for the rest of their working lives. The cumulative cost, over 40 years of working life, is staggering. Now let me show you what the same person could be doing instead, because the alternative isn't austerity, it isn't suffering, it's just slightly different. A reliable used car that's 3 to 5 years old, a Toyota Camry, a Honda Civic, a Mazda 3, something that the previous owner already absorbed the depreciation hit on, something that's still reliable, still safe, still comfortable, still capable of getting you everywhere you need to go. These cars typically cost between $15,000 and $20,000, some less. You can often pay for them in cash or with a small loan that gets paid off in 2 or 3 years instead of 7. The all-in monthly cost of owning a reliable used car like this is somewhere between $300 and $500 per month when you add up insurance, gas, maintenance, and any small loan payments, roughly half of what the new car owner is paying. And here's the part that matters most. Once the loan is paid off, that cost drops dramatically. The used car owner is suddenly only paying for insurance, gas, and maintenance, maybe $250 a month, all in. If you drive a reliable used car for 10 years instead of replacing it every 5, you spend the second half of that decade paying almost nothing for transportation, just the basics. Compare that to the new car person who's still paying their $767 payment, then trading in for another new car, then starting the $767 payment all over again. Over a working life of 40 years, the difference between the two approaches is somewhere between $200,000 and $400,000 in raw spending, and that's just the direct cost. It doesn't account for what that money could have been doing in an investment account instead. When you factor in the lost compound growth, what those car payments could have grown into if they'd been invested, the gap between the two approaches becomes well over $1 million by retirement. One car decision, made differently, repeated across a working life. Over $1 million in difference, not theoretical, mathematical. If the math is so brutal, why does almost everyone keep buying new cars? Why does the pattern repeat across generations? Why don't more people figure this out? The answer is uncomfortable. It's not about money, it's about identity. A car in modern life isn't transportation. It's a signal. It's the thing other people see when you arrive at work. It's the thing your neighbors notice in your driveway. It's the thing strangers judge when you pull up to a restaurant. The car is one of the most visible, most rid, most evaluated possessions a person owns. And the financial industry has spent decades training you to translate that visibility into a specific message. The newer the car, the more successful you are. The more expensive the badge on the hood, the more you've made it. The shinier the vehicle, the higher your status. Almost nobody examines this consciously. It just runs in the background. When you see someone in a new BMW, your brain registers successful. When you see someone in an 8-year-old Honda Civic, your brain registers ordinary. We've been trained by decades of advertising and social signaling to read cars as wealth markers. The trick is that almost none of it is true. The person in the new BMW is usually paying around $900 a month for the privilege of looking successful. The person in the old Civic is usually quietly building wealth in the background, free from the monthly drain that the BMW driver doesn't realize is hollowing them out. The visible signal says one thing. The actual financial reality says the opposite. This is why almost everyone keeps buying new. Not because the math works, because the social pressure is enormous and almost invisible. We feel embarrassed driving older cars. We feel anxious about what our coworkers will think. We worry that our friends will judge us. We tell ourselves we deserve a nicer car, and we sign the paperwork. The dealership knows all of this. The advertising knows all of this. The entire car industry is built around exploiting the gap between what cars actually are and what we've been trained to think they signal. Let me show you what this looks like in practice, not as theory, as a scene. Two co-workers at the same office, both age 32, both earning $70,000 a year. They sit at adjacent desks. They have lunch together sometimes. They like each other. They have no idea, looking at each other, what's happening to their financial lives in the background. The first co-worker, Brandon, drives a leased Audi A4. The lease payment is $640 a month. His insurance runs another $200 a month because the car is new and expensive to repair. Gas adds another $150. He spends almost $1,000 a month, every month, on his car. He likes the car. He feels good driving it. His coworkers occasionally compliment it. He tells himself he's earned it. The second coworker, Priya, drives a 7-year-old Honda Accord. She bought it 3 years ago for $14,000, paid in cash from savings. Her insurance runs $120 a month because the car is older and cheap to insure. Gas adds about $100. She spends roughly $220 a month on her car, total. The car is unremarkable. Nobody compliments it. She doesn't think about it much. It just gets her where she needs to go. Every month, Priya is saving about $780 compared to Brandon. She invests that money in a broad market index fund through her brokerage account, set up to auto-transfer the first of every month. After 5 years, Brandon has finished his lease and started a new one on a slightly more expensive Audi because his income has gone up, and he thinks he deserves it. He's been paying car costs the whole time. His net worth has barely moved. Priya, over the same 5 years, has invested somewhere around $46,000 in monthly contributions, which has grown to roughly $55,000 in her brokerage account. After 10 years, Brandon has paid for 3 different leased cars and still owns nothing. Priya is still driving her Honda. It runs perfectly. She's been investing the difference the entire time. Her brokerage account is now somewhere around $140,000. After 20 years, the gap between them is enormous. Brandon, despite earning the same income the whole time, has almost nothing saved beyond what his employer's retirement match has automatically contributed. Priya has somewhere over $500,000 in investments, plus a paid-off home she was able to afford because she wasn't drowning in car payments. Same job, same salary, same starting point, 2 completely different financial outcomes, driven primarily by what they decided to drive. And here's the part that hurts the most. Brandon never feels rich. Even with the nicer car, the lease payments make him feel financially stressed. Priya feels free. Even in the old Honda, she sleeps well at night, knowing her financial life is building underneath her. The visible wealth went to Brandon. The actual wealth went to Priya. The most interesting part of this whole pattern is what actually wealthy people drive, because it contradicts almost everything popular culture has taught us about wealth signaling. Study after study of actual wealthy households in the United States, the kind with millions of dollars in net worth, consistently finds the same pattern. The wealthy drive used cars. They drive reliable, modest cars. They keep their cars for many years. They very rarely buy luxury brands. Thomas Stanley's research on millionaires found this repeatedly. The average millionaire drives a car that costs significantly less than the cars driven by people who earn 6 figures but haven't built wealth. The most common car among American millionaires has consistently been a Toyota, followed by Honda, followed by Ford, brands considered ordinary by almost anyone watching. Why? Because actually wealthy people understand the math. They've usually run it themselves. They know what a monthly car payment is doing to their net worth over decades. They've decided deliberately not to spend their money on a depreciating asset that delivers almost no return on investment. The wealthy also understand something else that almost nobody talks about. They don't need to signal wealth. They have it. They don't feel the same psychological pressure to demonstrate their success to others. They've moved past that stage. They quietly drive their reliable cars to their reliable jobs and live their reliable lives, while the people trying to look wealthy spend themselves into ongoing financial stress. The people most desperate to appear wealthy are almost always the ones who actually aren't. The people who genuinely are wealthy are almost always the ones who appear modest. This inversion is one of the most consistently documented patterns in personal finance, and it shows up nowhere more clearly than in what people drive. If you want to spot a quietly wealthy person, look for the older Toyota in the driveway of an ordinary-looking house. The neighbor with the new luxury SUV is usually drowning. The neighbor with the 8-year-old Camry is usually quietly building generational wealth. This isn't always true. Some wealthy people do drive nicer cars, but the pattern across millions of households is unmistakable. The visible signal of cars almost always points in the opposite direction of the actual financial reality underneath. There's a specific version of this pattern that deserves its own attention because the financial industry has engineered something even worse than buying new cars on long loans. Leasing. Leasing is sold to consumers as the smart move, lower monthly payment than buying. New car every 3 years, no commitment to long-term ownership. It looks like a clever financial play that lets you drive a nicer car than you could otherwise afford. It's the opposite. Leasing is the single most expensive way to drive a car that exists. When you lease, you're paying for the depreciation of the vehicle, plus financing charges, plus a built-in profit margin for the leasing company. You're paying for the most expensive years of a car's life, the years when it loses the most value, without ever owning anything at the end. When the lease expires, you hand the car back. You have nothing to show for the $30,000 or $40,000 you've just spent. Then you sign another lease. Because the car you returned can't be driven anymore, you need a vehicle. So you start over. Another $40,000. Another 3 years. Another nothing at the end. People who lease continuously for 20 years can easily spend $250,000 on transportation without ever owning a car worth anything at the end. The leasing industry makes enormous profits from this dynamic, which is exactly why they market it so aggressively. The math is brutal in a way that almost nobody calculates. A person who buys a reliable used car and drives it for 10 years before replacing it spends roughly $70,000 on cars across a 20-year period. A person who leases new cars continuously for 20 years spends roughly $250,000. The difference, somewhere around $180,000, disappears into the leasing industry's pockets. Worse, the leaser ends those 20 years with no car. The buyer ends those 20 years with a paid-off vehicle worth roughly $5,000. There are very narrow circumstances where leasing makes sense. Business owners using tax structures, executives whose companies cover their leases, specific high-end situations involving electric vehicles where technology obsolescence is a real risk. But for the average person, leasing is the worst possible way to drive a car. And the industry has spent decades convincing people otherwise. If you currently lease, your single biggest financial move right now is to stop. Drive your current lease to the end, then buy a reliable used car. Never lease again. One question always comes up when people start thinking about this. What if my car dies? What if it breaks down constantly? What if I'm stranded somewhere? Isn't it safer to have a new, reliable car? The fear is reasonable. The math is not. A reliable used car, properly maintained, is significantly less likely to leave you stranded than people imagine. Modern cars, especially Japanese brands like Toyota and Honda, regularly last well past 200,000 miles with basic maintenance. The image of the constantly breaking down old beater is mostly outdated. Cars from the past 10 or 15 years are dramatically more reliable than cars from previous generations. But let's say you do have a breakdown. What does that actually cost? A typical major car repair runs between $500 and $3,000. A very expensive one, say a transmission replacement, might run $4,000 to $6,000. These numbers feel scary in the moment. Now compare that to what the new car owner is paying every single month. That $767 new car payment across a single year comes to over $9,000. Across the term of a typical 6-year loan, that's over $55,000. The used car owner could have a major repair every single year and still come out ahead financially. The reality is even better. Most used cars don't have major repairs every year. Most years, the only car expense is routine maintenance, oil changes, tire rotations, occasional brake work. The big repairs happen occasionally, not constantly. And when they happen, the used car owner has been saving so much money on monthly payments that they can easily absorb the cost. The new car driver is paying preemptively for repairs that will never happen on a vehicle that will never need them, at a cost vastly higher than just having repairs done when they're actually needed. This is the mental trick that keeps people in new cars. The fear of unpredictable expenses, the desire to know what you'll spend each month, the willingness to pay an enormous premium for predictability that doesn't actually deliver the security people think it does. A reliable used car, with a small emergency fund set aside for repairs, is dramatically cheaper than a new car loan over almost any time horizon. The numbers aren't close. If you're convinced, or at least curious, let me walk through how to actually do this, because there's a right way and a wrong way to buy used cars, and most people don't know the difference. First, focus on brands with strong reliability records. Toyota and Honda are the standard answers and remain the right answers. Mazda is excellent. Lexus and Acura, which are essentially Toyotas and Hondas with nicer interiors, are also fantastic. Avoid brands with reputations for expensive repairs. German luxury cars in particular tend to be financially brutal once they're out of warranty. Second, target cars that are 3 to 7 years old. New enough that they still have plenty of life left. Old enough that the previous owner has absorbed the worst of the depreciation. The first owner took the hit. You benefit. Third, get a pre-purchase inspection. Take any car you're considering to an independent mechanic before buying. The inspection costs around $100. It can save you from buying a vehicle with hidden problems that will cost you 10 times that to fix. Non-negotiable. Every single used car purchase should include this step. Fourth, pay in cash if you can. If you can't, take a short loan, 2 or 3 years maximum, for an amount you can comfortably manage. Avoid the temptation to stretch the loan term to lower the payment. The point of buying used is to be done paying for the car as quickly as possible. Fifth, plan to keep the car for at least 7 to 10 years. The financial benefits of buying used come from holding the car for a long time, not from constantly cycling through different used cars. Find one you actually like, take good care of it, drive it until it stops being reliable, then replace it. Sixth, do routine maintenance religiously. Oil changes on schedule, tire rotations, brake fluid, coolant. The small maintenance items prevent the big repairs. A used car that's properly maintained will last almost indefinitely. A used car that's neglected will break down quickly. The difference is almost entirely in the owner. Follow these 6 steps and you'll own dramatically cheaper transportation than almost anyone you know, without sacrificing reliability, safety, or any of the things cars are actually supposed to provide. The car you drive is one of the largest wealth decisions you make. Almost everyone gets it wrong. The financial industry has spent decades engineering a system that turns your transportation into one of the most efficient wealth extraction mechanisms in modern life. New cars, long loans, continuous turnover, leasing, the status pressure that keeps you locked into the cycle for the rest of your working life. The people quietly building real wealth have stepped out of the cycle. They drive older cars. They keep them for years. They take care of them. They redirect the money they're not spending on car payments into investments that compound for decades. Their cars are unremarkable. Their wealth is enormous. The two facts are connected in ways almost nobody explains plainly. So here's the question I want you to carry with you for the rest of the day. If you stopped trying to look successful for the next 10 years and quietly drove an older, reliable car instead, what would you do with the money you stopped sending to car dealerships and leasing companies? If you'd invest it consistently in broad market index funds, you'd likely have somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 additional dollars by the end of that decade. Over a working life, the same pattern produces over $1 million of additional wealth. That's the trade. Looking successful for a decade in exchange for being unsuccessful for a lifetime, versus driving an older car for a decade in exchange for having actual wealth for a lifetime. Most people will keep making the same choice their friends are making. They'll keep buying new cars. They'll keep leasing. They'll keep signing 7-year loans. They'll keep paying the visible wealth tax that quietly destroys their actual financial lives. But you don't have to be most people. You only have to see what the car is actually costing you, and quietly, calmly choose something different. The old car wins. The math has always said so. The patterns of actually wealthy people have always confirmed it. The only thing keeping you in the new car cycle is the social pressure that someone else benefits from when you give in to it. You can step out of that cycle, today, this weekend, with a single decision about what your next car will be. I'm Larry. I'm the Money Rebel, and I'll see you in the next video.